Hello, and welcome once again to The Escape. I am your host, Icarus. No, not him. Oh, he is someone else entirely. While he does play an intricate part in our story tonight, he is not the main character. The main character is a boy named John. John was a fat boy, and because he was so overweight, the children at school made fun of him. They threw things at him and spit at him and made him feel inadequate as a person, making sure that he understood just exactly how fat he was. The girls were especially cruel because they had a unique way of making him feel special while making him feel unspecial, wanted while unwanted. For this reason, he hated them. They would always point their crooked fingers at him, mock him, create lies about him that were fabulous and gruesome. They would have rumors about him and his mother and his father and anyone who was associated with him, so it was difficult for him to make any friends. His life was spent like this, and every day was a hardship for him, as you could imagine. Children can be especially cruel to those that they don't deem worthy to be in their circles. But, despite how cruel they were nothing in comparison to the doll that he had inherited. The inanimate object that sat in the corner of his room with a playful little plastic smile. He hated that doll. He saw that doll every single day. And at night it would stare at him in the blackness. And he just knew that it was plotting on him, trying to figure a way to work its tiny little hands and feet across the floor and crawl into bed with it and stick him with a knife. He could never speak this to his mother because surely she would never believe him. She was not quite the one to be superstitious, even though he had told her of his fear of the shadows. One night she had brought him a nightlight and plugged it in. This had worked to help him to fend off his fear of the evil that resided in his room, or so he thought. He was asleep one night, and suddenly he awoke in a sweat, blankets sticking to him like a second skin. He looked over and he saw this doll staring at him with empty eyes, the light of that nightlight flickering its empty little bulbs. It smiled at him. He felt a fear that he had never even felt before, a fear much greater than that of the darkness. It was a fear of something that lied deep within that doll. After that, the doll had become the author of many nightmares, ones in which tiny little hands would creep out from the window and grab him, screaming, kicking into the night, never to be heard from again. Because of this doll, he had a fear of all dolls, as well as the darkness. You can imagine how terrible it is to be afraid of everything, to be afraid of everyone, to be exiled to the point that you reside deep within yourself. At night he would press his face against the cool of the wall and pretend that he was going anywhere but there. He would run far, far away. But in the night, he would hear it, the whispers that would come from that door in that corner of the room. He would grip the pillow over his ears, hold it tightly over his face, hoping that he would shut out those whispers that resided only within his head. He couldn't help but be afraid of this door. This door was something evil, something enchanted. There was nothing good about this door, and he knew it. He could not convince his parents otherwise. As you see, this gift was given to him by his grandmother, who was dying of cancer when she stitched it with her aching hands and offered it to the little boy that she loved, and she loved her. In the light of day, this doll held no significant power, so he felt as though there were nothing that it could do to him in the daylight. So he would beat it, throw it against the wall, kick it and stop it, hoping that eventually he would stamp the life out of it. He would throw all of his violence, rage, imagine that it was all the little boys that would make fun of him and all the little girls who made him feel special. Mostly he thought of himself subconsciously. He was beating the fatness out of him. He was beating the loneliness out of him. But it didn't work. The next night would roll around and he would see that door staring at him as it had before, and it would alter another nightmare. Until at last, sleep barely came. He wanted to rid himself of that door, but there was just no way. It reminded him too much of his grandmother, and he decided that sleep just wasn't necessary. And as lack of sleep often does, began to play with his mind. He began to think that he heard things coming from the corner of that room, from that doll, words in a different language that only he understood, and he knew what they were saying. The terrible things that were being spoken inside of his mind he could never repeat, because someone somewhere would think he had gone mad, and would probably lock him away for thinking such things, such awful, terrible things. But one night he had reasoned within himself that it was silly to be afraid of something that he did not understand. He crawled down out of his bed and he sat Indian style in front of this little doll and spoke to it, and it spoke back. To his amazement, it was something he never would have imagined. Far beyond his greatest dreams, far beyond anything he could ever have thought. Suddenly the doll took on a new form, a new shape, and it was something more of a friend now than an enemy. And gradually, little John began enjoying playing with the doll. Or perhaps the doll began enjoying playing with little John. After that, John had no fear. He grabbed the doll and he would put it into his backpack and he would carry it with him to the schoolyard, where the children would continue to make fun of him and the girls would continue their flirtatious ways that would never lead to anything. This did not affect him, because now he saw through something of a camera lens, and everything was on the outside of him, and he was on the inside of himself, perfectly enshrouded by the flesh of his body. His parents thought it was unique, different, something had happened to him, because now he was quiet. He would eat and go about his own business and never even bother to say he loved them or give them hugs. And his father had explained to his mother that this was merely a part of growing up. This was simply something that a little boy does. How could he know, after all, that the things that his son were doing were nothing? And later that night, the doll was spoken to him. John made his way down the hallway. He crept down as stealthily as he could so he would not be heard by anyone. He slipped through the corridor, down to the end of the hallway, to the last door that was slightly open. He peered inside, looked at his mother who lay there sleeping. It was an interesting sight. He had never looked at her that way before, not the way the doll was making him look at her. She She was different now. He slipped away into the shadows, back to his bed. Following night, he listened to the voice of that door again. He made his way back to that room. He entered and stood at the side of his mother's bed and watched as she slept. He stood there motionless the entire night, watching her as she breathed in and out, in and out, in and out. He didn't have the courage to do what the door was telling him to do. He didn't want to do it. He didn't need to do it. It was too far. Too far. She hadn't, after all, done anything to her. And so it took a good week before, finally, he had mustered the courage to do what he knew he needed to. He stood over her with a knife, watching her as she breathed again, in and out, in and out. His hands were sweaty, his palms were sliding on the handle of the knife that he held. He gripped it tighter, his heart pounding as he looked down at her, his mind racing. He looked over to the door that was on the end of the bed, watching the macabre spectacle unfold. He raised the knife, heart beating, pounding. He wanted to take her life. It was the only thing that he needed to do to win the approval of the only friend that he'd ever had. Suddenly his mother opened her eyes and she looked at him. She said, Jonathan, what's wrong, Jonathan? He didn't answer. He was pale. His eyes were empty. His expression blank. She embraced him as only mother can, trying to wash him free of the dirt that had clung to his skin, trying to rebirth him from the homicidal nightmare that he drowned himself in. He raised the knife even further, even higher. And in her last fleeting moments, she thought she heard laughter.